Welcome to ZUSEM, the Zagreb School of Economics and Management. This is a special episode centered around our third international conference on the relation between artificial intelligence, social sciences, and humanities. The reason why we organized this conference is we want to share new breakthroughs in the field of AI, and we want to discuss the impact they will have on society, on teaching humanities, on society in general. And I am especially honored today to welcome to our studio Professor Mehul Bhatt. He graduated economics actually in Mumbai, India, and then had a switch of heart, went to Melbourne and did his PhD in computer science. I was invited, he taught at the University of Bremen, if I'm not mistaken. Eventually landed in Sweden at the University of Örebro, if I have pronounced that correctly, and is now doing a year, this year 2025, as a visiting professor at the Freie University of Berlin.
Correct.
Correct. So, Professor Bhatt, first of all, I wish to thank you again for joining the conference. It was great having you here. You had a really insightful keynote speech. I think eyes were wide open in the audience. I think you touched on some very, very interesting details, like on the future of AI, on the future of the technology that is not only surrounding us, but will ever more and more affect the way we live, the way we work, the way we study, and our lives in general. So, welcome. And did I miss anything in the introduction?
I think that's a fair enough introduction, sufficient for these purposes, I would say.
So I noticed that you loved the word interdisciplinary and or multidisciplinary. And can you, go, why study economics and then why change into computer science? I mean, I understand a lot of Indians go to the IIT, the Indian Institute of Technology schools, and obviously there's a lot of very talented engineers that I worked with in Silicon Valley. So, how did that come about?
Extremely long story, but before I go into that, thank you very much for the invitation here to the school and to the conference. It has been a very exciting 2 days for me here. Learned a lot of new things. And as you can see from your own conference, which focuses on interdisciplinary aspects involving humanities and social sciences and computer science, all in the service of AI and questions pertaining to the development and future of AI, which is very close to my own heart. So I really appreciated the invitation and all the discussions. Thank you very much. How did I come to computer science from economics?
Why economics in the first place?
Well, when I finished my schooling, I wouldn't say that there was a lot of thought put into exactly what I want to do. And I'm a little bit ashamed to admit this, but I basically picked economics as a way because I did not know what else. And looking back, I'm actually feeling that I was very fortunate I did that. Because coming to computer science after economics was a very conscious decision. A lot of thought and planning went into it. And I think that is very important in somehow achieving some success in something. So not to sort of demean the study of economics in any way, I was enjoying my time at the Narsi Monji College of Commerce and Economics in Bombay, which is where I graduated from. But what happened to me through a series of accidents is I got bits and pieces of introductions into what computing really is. What does it mean to program computers? I never had any experience. In fact, the first time I touched a computer or got access to a computer was pretty late in life, about 16 years of age. So that's very late by any standard. I can remind you, this was the time when Silicon Valley was sort of all in the news. It was really developing fast, and I missed that boat because that was a couple of generations ahead of me. So I was still in school when all that happened.
But I need to add here that you're very humble here. But I met you actually in Korea at one of the top conferences where you were the chair of a whole track, and you're certainly a very known name in the field of AI. So just to clarify things for our viewers who are who is this person, Mehul Bhatt? He's a very big person in the field of AI.
Okay, so thank you very much for the kind words. What happened during the economics time is, once I got the introduction to what computer scientists typically do, I started to teach myself. So in parallel to my economics degree, I started to literally sort of follow the curriculum of a computer science program. So I went through all the typical courses on my own, basically, and in the company of some very well-read and collaborating individuals, close friends, and we were influencing each other. And by the time I finished my bachelor's in economics, I would not be exaggerating that I had in parallel taught myself a bachelor's in computer science, except that I did not have a formal degree. And this was also a point at which I had.
And just to clarify, when you speak of a bachelor's degree, it's not like 3 or 4 years like in Europe. It was 5 years to get that.
In that system, at that point in time, we went through 2 years of junior college and 3 years of what is called higher college. So in total, it's an integrated program in commerce and economics consisting of 5 years.
Yeah.
Yes. And by the end of it, I had to ask myself, what do I want to do? What's the long game here? And I realized that I would need a formal certification of my interest, some kind of validation at the institutional level. And I was also pretty clear that I would like to also conduct research. I would not just want to go into the industry immediately. I want to sort of really go in depth into the area. And then I decided that it's time to embark on a formal degree, which is what took me to Australia eventually. There was an open, welcoming system over there, which did not attach too many strings into admitting me, as long as I could convince them in the first few months of the course that I actually meant business here. And it thankfully worked out very well. And then I did a master's in computer science after that, followed by a PhD in Australia.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Was that already in the field of AI, or was that in cognitive science?
This was in AI. So the master's tends to be a bit more broad. You learn AI amongst other things. But as you go into a PhD or towards the end stages of your master's, you're already starting to specialize with a thesis.
Sure.
And then in the PhD, I was already pretty settled on the research topic. Between the master's and the PhD, I also did a bit of an internship at the University of New South Wales in Australia. And then I got into contacts with some very nice individuals over there who further sort of kept refueling me with respect to my eventual goal. So I think all that was, I think I have been very fortunate that along the way, whenever necessary, I ran into the right people at the right time.
Let me throw you a curveball here, because I always have the young audience on my mind, because some of them are maybe making those life important decisions of what to study. Would somebody who graduated in computer science and is doing machine learning today, or artificial intelligence, would actually benefit from maybe studying economics, so sort of doing the reverse of what you did?
Absolutely. I mean, we are now in a very different type of economy here, a knowledge-centered economy, where you have tools and mechanisms which need to be applied for a particular function or a particular purpose in some domain. I mean, just look at my own case. Now I'm here being invited in an economics school to talk about AI.
And you're open to it, of course.
Yes, absolutely. It's my pleasure. So I think the interdisciplinarity is not just taking something from someone else and using it. If you truly want to make a societal impact, you need to try to become a little bit of the other person also. And this happens through immersion. So especially with something like AI, and now we are really in one of the most exciting times in the history of AI. This is the time to be doing AI.
And scary times as well. well.
And scary times.
In terms of job loss and
Absolutely.
things like that. But we'll get to that later on.
There's always opportunities and there's always threats. And I would really encourage people to not be boxed into one set of tools, one set of methods, or one way of thinking. It always pays off to learn other things. Especially when you are young, this is the time to inconvenience yourself a little bit. If not when you are in your 20s or 30s, when. If you ask me to now change my discipline and go into a completely new area, maybe it won't be as easily doable as it was earlier. So totally. Now, I would also advise people that don't just jump onto the bandwagon here and don't get sucked into by the hype. You need to be very focused. You need to have a very good sort of decision, preconceived idea of exactly what is it that you're trying to learn, and then acquire it. Try to be very focused and goal-based. But of course, if somebody from economics is sort of going to just wake up one day and say, well, now I want to do a PhD in computer science, some radical things are also, I would advise caution.
Yes, and I agree on that. I mean, there's a lot of, I spent 25 years in Silicon Valley, and if you wanted to go, and progress in your engineering career, usually people would do, 2-year MBA course or things like that, which gives you this, other more human perspective. You learn, more management tools. You learn more, interpersonal and communication tools, which are not necessarily, the primary focus of a typical computer science school. Although, things are changing and so forth. So,
I think the other novelty now, especially for people who are not within the development of AI, is that for the first time in the history of AI research, these techniques have been democratized in a very substantial way. Things are at your fingertips, and I'm not just talking about generative natural language-based techniques. There are lots of other AI techniques that are around, and as time goes by, you will see more and more usable products coming out. So it would also be sufficient maybe for many people to have a very good informed understanding of what these tools actually do, what are they actually good at, and be cautious about where not to use these tools.
Yes, where there are some risks, and obviously there's some regulation coming online as well. So we have to be aware of that. Excellent. Thank you for that sort of your arc story. Going back to the conference, so you have been in the field for a long time, and you have a wider perspective perhaps than a lot of my friends have also been in the field. Peter Norvig, for example, is a very hardcore engineering person, but he's wise these days. What do you think? Let me frame it this way. Everybody's so hyped and bombarded with the news of AI. And it's going to change everything. The monetary impact is so huge. No, it's a huge risk. It's an existential risk for humanity. There's a lot of, if you look at the newspapers and, your average AI headline, lots of big words, big claims, big things. You seem like a very, well-grounded, rational person that has been in the field. Give me your take on why would somebody, not necessarily study computer science, but would invest their time in understanding more AI? And what do you think are some areas that, we should watch in the next 5-10 years, because they will be changing even more?
So the question is about to what extent is this a hype versus reality?
So if I'm a young person and I'm trying to decide, should I invest some time into, learning about AI, whether, in a course that is at my university, which doesn't necessarily have to be a computer science university, or I should focus on something else. What's your take on that decision-making process? So
let's try to be concrete. So let's say I'm somebody who is just about to finish school, high school, and was wanting to embark in professional degrees at a bachelor's level. And if should I consider AI as a potential area of study? Absolutely, why not? If you are fascinated by the technology, if you had decided you want to become a doctor and now you've seen the hype of AI, the so-called hype of AI, and should you change your mind? Well, these are very personal questions. But let me just say one thing, that when you talk about the study of AI, if anybody is here for a quick buck, thinking they will spend 1 year or 2 years and suddenly they will know something supreme and that will give them the basis to build a product and become a millionaire, the chances of this happening are very low. The people who are designing these systems, these are very qualified engineers who have gone through years of training, and most of them have PhDs. This is what equips you to do something substantial and develop the field further. So it really depends. But if you are a young person open to different kinds of possibilities, I would totally recommend that, yes, technology is a good space to be in. But please don't also be completely swayed in by what is in the hot air, in the hot balloon right now, which is very specific types of machine learning techniques, because AI is a very big and convoluted basket of many different things. And before you even get to those things, you need to understand the basics of computer science. And you have to really be in for the long run. Once you undertake a bachelor's degree and then you go on to your master's, that's when you really truly get to some sense of what is really the topic about. And it's the PhD that gives you the adequate training. Now, there are some exceptions to this. There are some greatly talented individuals who do not follow this route. But I think in the average case, this is the space to be. This reminds me of some words that somebody had uttered to me many years ago. Once you figure out that you know everything that there is to know about in the world, they give you a bachelor's degree. Then when you figure out
what you don't know,
and everybody else knows, then you get a master's. And then you figure out, like nobody knows, then you give you a PhD. So to all the young people who are thinking about coming into AI, please do. But be careful. Don't put your eggs into the basket that may become irrelevant by the time you are coming of age in the area. So try to be committed on the long haul. But let's say you are someone who wants to go into medicine or finance or economics in your case. Most universities right now have some component of AI education, even if it's at a superficial level or even it's just for introduction or for being informed. I think students really need to be educated about what AI is, and more than that, what contemporary AI is not. And by all means, one should consider to invest some time and resources to learn about these things.
That's, I think you're on the spot here because, we had the past 30 years of the digital revolution, back in the day, we all, it was, if you studied economics, if you studied management, if you studied art, you still needed to write a paper. So you had to teach yourself, using Word or using Excel spreadsheets and whatnot. Today is, I think, that, the age where we need to understand, what are these AI tools capable of doing for us? I mean, you've heard about the story of, the scientists using, I think it's Google's research assistant, where, it gave them, it went on, did some research for them. They were asking questions like, is there any way to repurpose this drug that we have to something else? And it actually gave them a suggestion. And that was a very valid suggestion. They tested on patients and, yes, it works. And, so that's kind of, the thing. We're getting into an era where we have new tools and we need to understand what to do with them and how to use them. So.
Absolutely. And I think that, it's in a way, it's common sense that, let's say you compile the opinions of 100 supreme experts on a topic, and then you're able to statistically aggregate. And I think, why would you not want that knowledge?
Yeah.
So contemporary generative AI really does that, right? It compresses human knowledge and subjective opinions, and I think they are very useful in some cases. There are many other cases where you don't want that sort of uncertainty.
Yes.
You want solutions that are 100% correct all the time. So that's a different use case, of course. But clearly, there's also many great potential uses.
Yeah. And we're still, we're still scratching the surface of this.
This is proverbial tip of the iceberg, and a lot of usability and products are going to be built in the years to come.
I don't know, 4 or 5 years that we had, like direct interactions with these new tools.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's plenty happening, like all this mixture of agents and whatnot that's coming. Great. So we had like a few other guests at the conference, and I think there were some very interesting talks. Like a couple of them sparked new thoughts. Like and the one. Like analyzing the patient-doctor relationship, that just gave me, like an immediate insight. Hey, wait, like the medical field may change. Excuse me. I need some water. The medical field may change profoundly in the next 10, 15 years. Some occupations will go away. Certainly, they're already starting to go away. Some occupations will change their focus. So some things that were previously done by humans, like machines can do them. Humans will focus on like other more creative parts of that whole process. How do you see that future, like the changing landscape, like in terms of our societies and what's going to happen with the like jobs and job loss and new jobs created, but also old jobs that's, like in the past, automation replaced a lot of manual labor and sort of, like the blue collar, low wage, repetitive, boring jobs. Now we have AI, like which is, like replacing intellectual type of jobs, like clerks writing briefs on cases and whatnot. It's pretty interesting. So what's your take on the whole
maybe this
next
is
10 years?
This is the reality check on the very notion of what constitutes intellectual work. But that aside, I think this cycle of economic adaptation and repurposing is not novel. It's not new. Perhaps the rate of technological progress and perhaps its emancipation, they are at a much higher pace right now than ever before, at least in some sectors. My take on this is generally of optimism and positivity, but maybe in a cautious way. I think the European Union particularly has taken a leadership role here in sort of creating regulations and frameworks around the development and deployment and use of AI. And I expect that in the years to come, some of the more less desirable effects would be mitigated through this. I realize that there are certain economies, especially, for example, US, which is not as sort of stringent on regulation compared to the European Union. Things might play out differently. But I generally feel that people are not replaced. Their tasks are replaced. So I would say that certain kinds of subjectively oriented creativity tasks or things that we call creative, why not use the assistance of tools where you can outsource some of those labor-intensive activities? Let's say you are a creative artist, and usually you were used to sort of developing certain kinds of, let's say, visual media with your hand or using some basic design tool. And now there's an AI program that lets you explore a great number of possibilities, hopefully by also taking input from you. Why would you not use this? Now, of course, I can take a very rigid attitude.
That was classical thinking 2 years ago. Like, like I'm a marketing director in a company. I'll come up with, like a synopsis, a scenario, and then I have my design department, and like there's a graphic designer there. This graphic designer is today gone. I mean, people are writing, like blog posts and whatnot. Were not in all places because some places understand what's the value of having a human brain to do your graphic design, because it's not just creating something that looks nice and neat, but there's also a lot of places where like it's just raw economics. No, it's like I'll pay less for my product, and like my profits will be higher. So it's going to be an interesting, tricky balance.
Yeah. No, I mean I agree that there's a lot of unknowns right now. There's some shaking up going on, and I understand that that people are nervous. But I think in the long term, once you start to see usable products and some very good use cases of contemporary AI, successful AI technologies, I have a feeling that people will learn how to make use of them and really synergize and build on them. So at this point, people are going through the aha moment, like, oh, wow, this is, I'm a little bit scared. But I would note and remind you that it's very, very natural to be surprised by things that you don't understand. So let's say I go into something like a generative tech system. I'm not going to name any one in particular here, but there's many. And then I start asking questions about, let's say, quantum theory or quantum field dynamics or some area of physics that I really know nothing about beyond the surface. How can I judge the correctness of this, the level of abstraction, the detail? Will I be able to become an expert using that information? I can only say, okay, I don't know.
Yeah.
Give me something that I know about, then I'll point out all the faults. So I don't think these systems are at the level at which one should be really seriously worried about it. I don't think humans are going to be redundant anytime soon, not through these technologies in their contemporary stage. My main optimistic advice to anyone who cares to listen is, please do not exclude these things from your life. Try to learn them. Try to understand where does it work, where does it fail, and in some years let the dust settle and see what products are coming into your hands.
Yeah, I mean, and look, you teach students, I teach students. And like the Zagreb School of Economics and Management is actually part now on this big European consortium, which has many projects. We are in the only one that deals with AI and what is the impact of AI on education, on higher education, and how do we actually envision like the school of the future. So it's quite interesting. And I mean, we are working on concrete programs. We have deliverables. It's called like an online university powered by AI. Where we are using and trying to devise and understand how to use AI as like a tool for us humans to deliver knowledge to other humans. So we had a nice discussion, with some of our colleagues at the school this afternoon, exactly about that topic. And I don't know, what are your concrete, so from your own profession, experiences in using AI or adapting to how students use AI to complete courses? So
I would like to sort of set a context around this. When we say using AI in education, so there's many types of AI and then many different types of educational initiatives as well. And even when you sort of partition the educational space amongst different faculties, and there's also different stages in education. So there's basic courses, then there's advanced courses that require going beyond textbooks and doing project work. And all of these things need to be designed, evaluated, and conducted very differently. All in all, I see a lot of shake-up right now. Many of my own colleagues, not only in Sweden, but also in other countries, they are reporting that many students are directly relying exclusively on these generative techniques in their everyday life. Particularly in the humanities and social sciences, I believe people are reporting a much bigger crisis than in some other disciplines. We don't yet have complete understanding and answers to everything, but my approach in this is I do not like to make regulations and rules about things that I cannot control. So that's in general a principle I follow. But here, there is nothing to be controlled. I think these are very powerful tools. Use them as aids to enable you, to empower you in your education. If you're going to use these things as a substitute for your own thinking, then you're going to be at loss. And there's nothing the teachers can do about it. So let's say I was a lecturer in humanities and I gave my students a task. Well, read this novel and write me a synopsis in 5,000 words. You could write something. You could ask the generative system to make something. You could compare you could try to analyze why your version is or is not similar to the generated version. How can you marry the two, again, using technology, and use this in your learning process. Try to understand the outcome a little bit, and even maybe try to find points of contradiction. That's one way to go about it, and I think there's nothing wrong in this. But let's say if I just decide to do nothing and just use the output and submit it as an outcome, well, who are you cheating, right? Yourself or your teacher? So that's one type of teaching and learning. In computer science, I would say we measure and evaluate things in very many different ways. So the students that work with me, they are not evaluated with just one metric. They are constantly involved in the courses. They come every week. They conduct many different activities. They engage in interactions with me. They are working on a project in groups throughout the course. At the end of the course, they have to defend this. They have to present their entire work in the course. And as I say often, shame on me if my work can be done by a system.
By a large language model. That's true. But then again, like we had an interesting comment in this discussion in the afternoon where, like some of our very young colleagues, like they said, well, like we live in the age and era of the generation of instant gratification, where like I want my results like immediately. Like if I search for something, I get the results. If I want to know what Joe is doing, like I can check it up on, I don't know, a social platform, and I know within minutes. Like if I want to know something, I want that knowledge in minutes. So like I guess like some certain parts of knowledge can perhaps be taught, like more efficiently and, like in a quicker way. But I think Maria, like was our colleague, she had a good point where she said, well, I mean, you can teach some things, like quickly, but you need to teach, like people how to learn, and that takes a long time. Or like if you're going in a scientific career, how to research, how to do research, how to understand what is it that you don't know, how to imagine the world, like that will be in 5 years or 10 years, because as my dear colleague Ray Kurzweil said once, like I'm not running after the ball. I'm running to the place where the ball will be in 5 years or in 10 years, which is a useful skill. And like maybe we'll teach more of those skills, and we'll have the digital assistants or digital, like whatever you want to call them, do all the sort of go there, like prepare for this project, understand what is, like a neural network, like use, like a large language model, use whatever YouTube videos. Like once you have a basic understanding, then we'll talk about some of the properties of the neural network or things like that.
Right.
Or in the case of economics of elastic pricing. So.
Yeah. No, I mean, if your point is AI going to influence education? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's going to be an entire ecosystem of these tools that are enabled to assist you in learning, and I think it's only a matter of time that you will see very concrete, usable products. There are quite a few right now as well, and I should also remind you that what you're seeing in the web or the app interface of posting a question and getting a textual response right now. This is a prototype, a demonstration of what could be done. Wait until it's packaged into usable products with use cases, and that's where the real power will shine. But generative AI or modern machine learning alone will not do that. You will need to sort of envelop this within conventional deterministic AI systems. So there is a lot of hybrid AI that you will see where different types of AI techniques are sort of integrated with generative techniques and in the service of building usable products, be it in education or in other domains. The analogy I would use is think of this, the generative system as a very powerful sort of engine that can explore possibilities and generate many possibilities. Some of those possibilities are very good and they provide answers to important questions. But it is the human knowledge, the context of a particular problem, the knowledge of an expert, all of this will have to be combined to decide which one of these alternatives are good for us human beings in society for the particular problem that you're trying to solve. And it's only a matter of time that you will start seeing some practical examples of this.
That we'll see a large language model coupled to like a large protein folding modeling model coupled to an automatic lab machine, and then like just doing their like chemical synthesis and then testing that on bacteria.
Other things like what is now sort of disparagingly sometimes called old AI. I don't know why
good
is it old.
Old-fashioned AI.
Exactly. Knowledge representation. I know this is not a technical discussion, but constraint solving.
No, we'll lead into. I was about to lead into the technical discussion because we're talking and people actually don't know what you're doing in the field of AI. So I wanted you to actually talk. Like without formulas, of course, but let me sort of give a short intro. So Mehul, like the project that he presented at the conference is, like we all have heard about self-driving cars, and while like when they do their function without problems, then they seem like magic. There's a lot of things going on in them to understand the world around them. Some things that we humans take for granted. For example, if I'm walking, if I'm driving, and there's a truck in front of me, large truck, and I see a pedestrian that is disappearing behind the truck, so it's in front of the truck from my perspective, I know that this pedestrian could reappear on the from behind the truck, and that I could run over the pedestrian. It's built into our modeling capability that we start to develop at the age of peekaboo or whatever it is, 2 years of age. So Professor Bhatt is actually working on systems where you take a scene representation. And why don't you tell us, a little bit of the details, but for our lay audience, and why this is important in cars?
Okay. I will basically start with pick on the example that you were talking about right now. So let's say you are driving a car, and what's the most critical decision that you make here? How much to steer and how much to brake or accelerate? And you do this in a very tight window of a couple of seconds in the past and the future. So you maintain situational awareness of the world. Imagine somebody's rash driving next to you. You figure out very quickly that I need to be away from this. You will try to change your lane or something like that, right? Or there's another car in front of you or a bicyclist in front of the car in front of you. The bicyclist goes into some occlusion. You know that it's still there, even if you're driving at a very high speed. And that the bicyclist does not disappear. So what we call, in technical words, you maintain a space-time mental model of the world around you. The system has to do something like this. There are many different ways it can go about doing it. So a car typically has a range of sensing devices, cameras and radar and LIDAR systems, GPS. It basically what is known as multimodal fusion of data. So you take multiple sensing modalities, you combine them to make a unified model of this. And now the devil lies in the detail. How do you actually go about implementing this space-time mental model of the world? Your beliefs about what was true, what is true right now, and what is likely to happen in the next couple of seconds. Because that's the window that is relevant in driving.
Right.
I'm talking about driving here. You could make same arguments about other things, like a robot that is trying to conduct some kind of a task alone or together or in collaboration with a human being. And there are many other situations where the same thinking applies. So what we do in our research in the Co-Design Lab EU is that we try to combine artificial intelligence and human intelligence. So I work broadly at the interface of these two areas. So on the artificial intelligence side, developing computational models of visual perception and how to make a space-time mental model of the world in diverse application situations. And in cognitive science and behavioral techniques, I work on basic questions in vision or visual perception. What is it that in the world that guides our attention? What is it that takes our attention? How do we make a mental model of the world? What happens in the brain? How is the brain working when it comes to the dynamics in the world? And this notion of physically being in the world through your sensing and acting modalities. So you conduct activities and conduct actions in the world. At the same time, you receive input from the world, what is now known as, not now, it's known as embodied interaction, a rather fancy sounding label, but pretty relevant, especially in contemporary times. So what we do is we try to combine behavioral research with computational methods with the idea to design human-centered systems. In a nutshell, that's the main purpose of our lab.
And human-centered systems having a meaning, I mean, that's a term that we hear often that people do not necessarily understand. So human-centered systems today in the realm of AI means systems that are compatible with humans, that obey human values, that are not harming humans. Like there's a whole array of attributes that they have, right? So, I mean, this is why we have top experts in AI coming to the Zagreb School of Economic and Management, because we are the transmission, so to speak. There's people who will be implementing such kind of systems, whether it's in factory floors, whether it's on roads like Rimac cars, and they need to be aware of all of the facets that go into not that making these systems human-centered and human-safe, but also, in planning how to manage them, what are the requirements that we will need to meet if we want to endeavor into an economic activity, start a company, start a startup that is working and operating in this space. So
all right.
Thank you for coming again.
So I want to answer this one point about what human-centered really means.
Sure.
So humans are starting to become great again lately. We recently celebrated 10 years of the Co-Design Lab, whose entire mission has been human-centered AI. So it's been some time that
Where is it? Where is the lab?
It includes universities and close collaborators in different European countries. Of course, it's primarily based out of Sweden, which is where I am based right now at Örebro University. But we have colleagues in Germany, other universities in Sweden, in Denmark, and Italy, for example.
Okay. And you're still, admitting other collaborators to...
Absolutely. There are some conditions under which we start working together with shared strategic objectives. But we are very open about this, and we like to engage with other people.
Right.
So I'll give you one example of what human-centered could concretely mean, and there are also more abstract conceptual interpretations of this when you look at regulation and things like that. So to be very concrete, let's say you are designing a robot. Now, when we interact as humans with one another, there are certain social cues, what we call multimodal cues, about looking each other in the eye, nodding to each other, having fine-grained gestures, intonations, hand movements. How would you feel if I came within your personal space, did not blink, and constantly looked at you in your eyes for 30 minutes while we are talking? It is going to inconvenience you, right? So
that would be weird.
That would be weird. So we want to design robots that probably do that, or let's say virtual agents or avatars. You're talking about education, AI and education. How would you think of a virtual AI teacher that cannot follow human-like cues? So firstly, you need to understand human factors, and understanding of human factors comes by actually studying human behavior in naturalistic, everyday, ecologically valid settings. I'm sorry, I'm using some heavy words here, but what that really means is you cannot separate the study of humans from the context in which that activity happens.
And from building actually useful AI systems.
So what we would do is we would, this was just a very simple example, but we would put people in diverse situations of everyday interaction. We collect data, we analyze that data, and doing this analysis has some empirical behavioral research objectives of its own. But then the idea is whatever you've learned, you need to incorporate that knowledge within the design of AI systems, such as robots. That would be like one concrete example, and there's a whole range of these things. We've done some work in AI for architecture design, where we've studied human behavior in navigation inside buildings, in airports, in hospitals, in diverse situations. We've actually done experiments in real hospitals in Chile and in the United States in the past. Also in Germany at train stations, for instance. And we learn a lot about human behavior and decision making when it comes to perception in everyday situations. So now how do you incorporate this knowledge within the AI system so that when the AI system is enabling someone to design a building, it intrinsically has access to some heuristics, so to speak, that are going to guide the generation of solutions that will then enable an architect to design a better building.
Just to make that concrete, like you gave a great example with, like getting lost somewhere and putting cues into the environment.
Right.
Which is, like something that is done by a plugin now.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
understand. So like if you're an architect, you're designing a building, you have this AI plugin which will suggest or put, like something which preserves orientation in our brains so that we don't get lost and confused, which is, I guess, the opposite of what you want in a mall, in a shopping mall, where they want you confused all the time so that you spend more time in a mall.
Yeah, actually, this is not, I mean, maybe you're saying this as a joke, but it's actually true.
I know.
Yes.
I know.
Yes.
Like they put smells in the air, and the music goes, I think, in a loop of 20 or 15 or 20 minutes. It starts very slow, and then it quickens the pace, and then at the end of that loop, like you're supposed to close a transaction and whatnot.
Yeah, I mean, that is actually a concrete design requirement in malls. Yeah. So for your listeners, if somebody wants to look at the architecture and AI work, you can look at the Design Space group, which is a spin-off from our co-design lab. And we've been working closely with architectural firms and practicing architects over the last years. It started from some research projects at a time. They were launched at a time when I was still in Germany. So before coming to Sweden, I was a professor at the University of Bremen in Germany. So it started over there, and then it continues to date.
Right. So we talked about, like good products for users, like friendly products, human-centric, like solutions for us in the world. There's obviously, like the sort of, let's call it the nefarious side of AI, and the need for, like having rules in society in how we use AI, how we deploy it, and what happens there. So, like that could be, like a show on itself. Like we don't need to go into that territory. But I think we as people who work in educational institutions and, like who have, like a large body of knowledge in human terms, like lots of experts, both at your place and at my place, like we do interact a lot with people who are in politics, in government, and we talk and we are trying to shape a future. So you gave, like the example of America being very unregulated and people ready to break rules and whatnot, and Europe being the opposite. Like, do we have a good balance in Europe in terms of AI regulation? What do you think is missing? What do you think are some things that perhaps we should be looking into the, I don't know, next 5 years?
I wouldn't say America, or at least I did not imply that America is unregulated. There is the degree of regulation is very different compared to what we see in Europe and some other places. And I actually think that regulation is good. Standardization is also very good. If you look at all the things that work in society, or just the history of technological progress and development, we do like to standardize things. That's how we are sure about things. So I'm all up for it, as long as it also does not come right in front of technological innovation also. So there are some places in the world where there are the Silicon Valley is like the experimental lab of the world, right? And it's okay.
Right.
It's okay. Not everybody
Yeah.
has to follow all the regulations in experimental situations.
A startup cannot afford, like a legal
Yeah.
team
Yeah.
to, like go and, implement standards and all that. They need to build prototypes fast. They need to try them out in a safe manner, obviously.
So there is some
move
breathing
quickly.
space necessary. So I would also be not happy if, let's say I'm a private organization interested in making autonomous cars. Then I think I would consider it to be an obligation that before I put something on public infrastructure, it has to go through certain checks and balances. So human beings, right? Human beings are having a very powerful AI system called the brain, right? By the time we turn of driving age, we still have to go through obtaining a license, no matter where you are. In fact, if you change your country, you probably have to go and get a new license. I distinctly remember my case, having a driving license in India. When I went to Australia, I had to get a new license, right?
Right.
We don't let even the human brain go through this kind of liberal performance. Why not? Why shouldn't we subject an autonomous car through some checks and balances? So I think the government really has a very important role to play, and which is where the European Union, I think, has taken a leadership role in many ways in trying to even anticipate what regulation will be like. This is still early days. The EU AI Act is a work in progress. It will be interpreted and reinterpreted based on the industry, the line of work, the context. I'm not convinced that there can be one blanket AI law or regulation that will monitor everything across the board.
And not all applications are the same, and
Exactly.
not all applications have the same impact. I mean, if somebody were trying to operate on me with an unlicensed robotic contraption,
Exactly.
I would have second thoughts about that.
Exactly.
So
within reasonable sort of boundaries, I think innovation needs to happen. But at the same time, I'm also very proud, and sometimes I'm very concerned why certain things are like. Take the case of autonomous cars. You may remember some years ago the very first reported casualty with an autonomous car that happened.
Yes.
I believe it was Tempe, Arizona.
Tempe, Arizona, Uber car.
Exactly. And a lot of issues around it, right? So how do you analyze what was the cause of the accident? Who does this evaluation? If there's a plane incident happening with an aeroplane, we have a standardized system, we have a black box, we've got data, and there are very well-established means to analyze that. The car industry will similarly come together and regulate itself also, but we should not count on that to happen. Government will have to step in. And usually, I think
all of that costs extra money. So
there has to be industry and government partnership here as well. These are not two antagonistic entities.
Sure.
They're all in the service of the people. So the sooner they come together and work together, and I think most advanced industries, they establish standards eventually, and this is when things start to sort of become stable. So I think the hot balloon era of autonomous vehicles is pretty much behind us, and this is when you can really expect in the next few years some real progress.
Some real progress. Yeah, I agree on that, and I would say like having my 25 years of Silicon Valley, the later you start thinking about certain things when you're designing large software systems, the greater the price will be, to pay later. We always, let's start doing regular builds right now when the software is still small. Let's do the infrastructure around the product already when we are developing the product, because if you delay that, no, we'll deal with regulation later, we'll deal with safety later, we'll deal with privacy later. It will come to bite you, it's just going to cause a larger problem. Then if you start, when you started designing your product, start thinking about privacy, start thinking about security, start thinking about AI safety or control of AI bias and all the other things that we know how to build today. It's not like a new science or anything like that.
So, I mean, just to build on that previous example, in our own work, what we have done is, I was earlier talking about doing experiments with humans. By experiments, I mean observing in a very distant way, monitoring how do humans interact in space. We've done that also with driving. And we've identified a whole range of safety-critical situations where humans would typically make a lot of mistakes. And we've also tried to compile situations that could be interesting benchmarks for manufacturers of autonomous cars to experiment their work with. So the idea here is that there should be some established independent or third-party mechanisms to test and evaluate systems that need to go into the market. So that you don't have to take the word of the company. So I, as a company, might say, well, I've got a completely autonomous driving system, and you don't need to take my word for it. Show me your benchmark and evaluation situations. Because I have seen that many manufacturers and also experimenters, they talk about X 100,000 number of miles that they've been using for training the data. Then in reality, 90% of those miles resemble one another.
Right.
So what you don't need, sure, machine learning is data dependent and you need that, but you also need small data that is nuanced, carefully curated from an evaluation standpoint.
Sure.
So this is yet another example of how government, academia, and industry could come together and make partnerships.
And there's
to
a lot
really
of,
work on the problem together.
There's a lot of potentials for schools to be an active player in such endeavors. That's very insightful. Thank you. Well, we're sort of getting close to our end of the taping time, but I wanted to sort of close with just a completely different topic. So, what would you say to yourself when you were 20? Now that you have the knowledge that you have.
I tend to not ruminate too much, so you put me on a bit of a spot. There are, it would also be silly to say I'm very happy with everything, because that means I have not learned, so I cannot say that either. But the one thing that has been my sort of, for accidental reasons, I'm not saying there's a careful design here, a series of accidents, and somehow I was able to make use of those to whatever extent I could. The one thing that has impacted me is coming from a different discipline and then going into the other area. So I came from economics, I taught myself computing, computer science, and then went into computer science. After doing a PhD on a very theoretical type of area, I sought applications, and that took me into architecture, visual perception, and most recently I've gone into cognitive psychology and neuroscience. And it has been a fascinating experience. There are times, these are all stories of success, but let me give you an example of a failure.
But that's not what I asked.
No, I know what you asked, but I'm coming there.
I'm very specific, but yes, okay.
I'm coming there. I'm coming there. Because what I say will make a lot of sense in that context.
Okay.
In my PhD time, I had to decide what area of research I should go into. And at this point, I was trying to connect the dots with economics. And financial engineering was quite the rage at this time. And in my naivety, I thought I could also go into this. And someone demotivated me from doing that. And I also was convinced that perhaps my lack of formal training in mathematics at an adequate level might come in the way of reasonable impact. And I did not pursue that route. But now, with all this experience, I wish I could go back and tell myself, don't worry about it. You will learn what is relevant, what is necessary, and then along the way you will learn more, right? So this is my response to my 20-year-old self, as you pointed out. Don't think that you need to understand everything at once. You can understand just enough, and then as you go along, you will learn and acquire the right skills, especially in today's age where access to information is there's a paradigm shift in how you gain access to information, how you compile sources. So we are better prepared. And I should have known this back then as well, because here I was coming from economics and into computer science. I taught my way into it, and yet I was a little bit afraid of going into this area. Okay, I make the most of whatever area I was in, but who knows what would happen if I had pursued the other area. So that is just my little reflection or message into the past, if I could time travel.
I think this is a perfect place to end this conversation, and I think you actually just taped a very nice message for your kids when they will be 20 years old. So maybe you encourage them to watch this in the future. So to reviewers, this has been my privilege to have Professor Mehul Bhatt here as a guest and as a guest at our conference. This has been Boris Debic. This is the Zagreb School of Economics and Management. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.